difficulty with our camera this morning. I'm going to just turn it this way so you can see our chairman, Bruce. We do not have a quorum in the room, so we cannot take any action on anything today. This is not an official meeting. However, we do have a number of people participating remotely today, and so we do have a critical mass to proceed through what would otherwise be our agenda. We do have good participation remotely. We just don't have a quorum here in the room today. So with that, I will yield the floor to you, Bruce, and maybe we'll go around introductions and get started.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Bruce Thomas, Town of Hooksett. I'd like to call the meeting from the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission Technical Advisory Committee to order. So August 17th, 9:34 a.m. I'd like to go around and everybody introduce themselves. Again, I'm Bruce Thomas, Town of Hooksett. And you are?
Tammy Zamoyski, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
Zach Swick with the commission. David Tilton with the commission.
Anthony Summers with the commission.
Suzanne Nienaber with the commission.
Nate Miller, staff with the commission.
And Adam Lasnik, staff with the commission.
And it looks like we have Cam.
Hi, good morning.
Mr. William Rose.
Yeah, good morning, William Rose, DOT.
Andrew Haydick.
Good morning, Andrew Haddock, down at Chester.
Andrew Fabiski.
Yep, Andy Fabzeski, Howard Stein Hudson.
Mark Davis. Davey.
Morning, everybody. Mark Davey from Stratford Regional Planning Commission.
Mark Gravelis. Apologize for any mispronunciations.
Mark Ravelisi, Howard Stein Hudson.
Mark Soonen.
Sure. Mark Soonen from Town of New Boston.
Jason Cleghorn.
Jason Cleghorn, City of Manchester.
George Elias.
George Sierras, Town of Derry.
Becky Hebert.
Morning, Becky Hebert, Town of Bedford.
Lee Levine.
Good morning, Lee Levine, Federal Highway Administration, New Hampshire.
Mike Whitten.
Morning, Mike Whitten, Manchester Transit.
Kristen Clark.
Hi, Kristen Clark, City of Manchester.
And Vanessa Partington. Oh.
Good morning, Vanessa Partington, NHDES, and my supervisor, Jessica Wilcox, will also be joining me.
And Craig Tufts just joined us. Hi, Craig. And Jessica Wilcox. Okay, thank you. The first item, well, we can't review the notes from the last 3 meetings due to the lack of quorum. New business, discussing the NHDOT Florida Study Program is William Rose from Policy and Planning Manager from the NHDOT. Go ahead, Mr. Rose.
Hey, good morning. Thank you. I'm William Rose with the New Hampshire Department of Transportation's Policy and Planning section within the Bureau of Planning and Community Assistance. And I am joined this morning with a couple of team members from our consultant, Howard Stein Hudson. They've introduced themselves already, Andrew and Mark. And we will be providing the group with an update of the statewide corridor study program. I'm all set to share my screen, Cam.
You should be. Let me know if it doesn't work. And
we'll find out in a second.
Yeah. Excellent.
So this morning, what I'm hoping to do is just provide kind of a brief history overview of the project, where it came from, what we're anticipating doing. And then Andrew will lead us through a conversation about the work that's been done, mostly by Howard Stein Hudson, to help figure out the best way to identify and prioritize the corridors in the state. And we'll talk a little bit about next steps and then dive into any questions the group might have. So if you're not familiar with the statewide corridor study program, it was created as part of the 2019 to 2028 10-year plan. It's currently funded at about $700,000 per year. And those funds are coming from our ability to flex up to 50% of the congestion mitigation air quality program funds from the CMAQ program to other federal highways eligible activities. And there is one project that is currently in the 10-year plan that is being funded through this program, and we will talk a little bit about that later. A little bit more history. Howard Stein Hudson, as I mentioned, we have 2 of the team members on the call this morning, but we hired them on early in 2022. And their initial efforts have been focused on defining what a corridor is here in the state of New Hampshire, and also working to develop a prioritization tool to guide the next step in the process, which is to actually engage in individual corridor studies. We do have a steering committee for this early work, just to kind of guide these efforts. And real quickly, the folks that are on that committee, the administrator of our asset management and performance strategies group, that's the group that deals with a lot of the pavement and traffic volumes and things like that that you've been dealing with in terms of performance measures at the TAC and Policy Committee at Southern New Hampshire. Our administrator of the Bureau of Environment, as there are resource issues and concerns associated with a lot of the work that we do. We do have one Regional Planning Commission representative, that is Matt Waitkins from Nashua Regional Planning Commission. And we've also got the Bureau of Bridge Design. Our new position in the Department of Transportation is the State Highway Safety Administrator, a name that many will recognize. The former administrator of the Bureau of Traffic, Bill Lambert, has been relocated to within the Highway Division here at the department and is focused solely on safety issues. The chief of our project management group, the Bureau of Traffic Administrator, our public transit administrator, many of you may know him, Fred Butler. And we have other representation, a familiar face to many of you at the TAC, Lucy St. John, represents the Bureau of Planning and Community Assistance. So the focus of this corridor study planning effort is really to improve the strategic approach the department is taking to project development, and specifically looking to identify opportunities and challenges within a corridor context around the state. Most of the time when we're dealing with 10-year plan projects, we're focused on specific issues, intersections that are concerns, or particular portions of roadway that either see vehicular conflicts, speed, things like that. And this is really looking to get a bigger picture and look to use that bigger picture to help identify better solutions that are a little bit more informed. Certainly one of those benefits is to get additional and more detailed information to our project managers as projects commence. So that could include anything from resources, whether it's threatened endangered species or National Register of Historic Places eligible facilities, things of that type. Better information as it relates to traffic volumes and types, including conflicts, and that would be both motorized and non-motorized forms of transportation, certainly asset conditions. And then one of the items that we're looking forward to is an opportunity for more informed, better informed local concerns processes. So engaging more with the communities that are on the corridor to figure out what other issues we might not be aware of just based on a kind of a data overview. And by doing all that, we're looking to be more strategic versus reactive. As I mentioned, most of the time we're talking about specific issues. Having a more corridor focus gets us with that bigger picture. We're hoping that this is maybe better information for the 10-year project selection process. There's a question mark there because we haven't figured out quite how yet, since we haven't done any corridor studies, but we have an eye on how this process can better inform the way that we're selecting 10-year plan projects, both within the department and certainly as an improvement or enhancement to the existing regional planning commission processes. And certainly access management is on our radar. By getting larger focus, gives us a chance to maybe take a look at adjacent land use and development potential and looking to address potential future access management related issues before we put driveways down and actually have issues that we're trying to resolve. And sorry, I skipped over that. I'm not going to go back, but one of the major items, certainly a focus for the department here in New Hampshire, as well as around the country with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, is infrastructure resilience, something we've been certainly engaged in here in the state of New Hampshire for a while. But with some of the new Protect program funds and things of that type through federal highways, there's more of an incentive to get even more engaged with the resiliency. So not just, I think a lot of folks associate resiliency with what's happening along the coast. But certainly this summer has emphasized the issues we can have with inland waterways and the effects that poor drainage and flooding can have on our infrastructure. With that brief overview, I would like to turn things over to Andrew to start to take us through a little bit of a tour of the prioritization tool and the initial work that's been done. So I will stop sharing, and Andy, you can go ahead and pick right up where I left off.
Thank you, William. Let me share my screen.
Are you able to share? Okay,
I
great.
believe so. Yep. Can you see that?
Excellent. Yep.
Great. So, as William mentioned, we're helping out with the corridor prioritization program, and I just wanted to give kind of a brief overview of what our scope of work is, and then do a tour of the prioritization tool that we've developed. So, the general goal of this project was to score and prioritize and identify the corridors, which are the, state numbered and US numbered routes within New Hampshire. And the first goal of this project was a data collection effort where we utilized the New Hampshire State Online GIS Catalog, as well as US Census data and other research in best practices for corridor definition and management from other state DOTs and the Federal Highway. This task overall involved aggregating these data sets and combining them on a GIS layer and segmenting the corridors to be able to produce kind of the final product with which the score will be assigned on. The next stage was developing the actual prioritization tool itself. This is based in Excel and is used to score the corridors and develop the weighting factors used for scoring. And then the final two steps, which we're kind of on right now, are finalizing the prioritization tool through feedback from steering committee and public, as well as working on the final reporting and coming to meetings like this to engage with the public. So, general overview of the data collection effort. One of the main data sets that we used was the New Hampshire DOT roads data set, and that includes useful data across the state for things like the width, number of lanes of the roadway, the New Hampshire roadway tier, as well as average annual daily traffic from 2012 to 2021. And we were able to use that to establish traffic growth rates in the state, which we've pictured to the right here. And then another major data set was the US Census data from 2010 to 2021, and that allowed us to pull in things like socioeconomic data for metrics such as poverty, non-primary English speaking, population density, and population growth. Another major part of the data collection effort was crash data within the state. The crash data we obtained was represented as point data from 2015 to 2019, and we were able to join them to the corridors to develop a rate of how many property damage, injury, and fatality crashes occurred on each corridor. And with that, we were able to calculate the equivalent property damage only, or EPDO calculation, which allowed us to weight the fatal and injury crashes higher, so we could really score the corridors from a overall safety level. And as you can see on the right, it's a heat map of the crashes within the state. Another data point we collected or obtained was the driveway permit data. This is where the highway access permit it comes in, and we're using that as a proxy for where traffic growth may be headed in the future by accounting for the future development that applies for these permits. And one of the last main data sets we were able to utilize was the multimodal statewide bike plan. And this included things such as whether roadways had existing bicycle facilities or whether they were desired, as well as the bicycle level of traffic stress, which is kind of graphically displayed below, and it's a metric of how likely people are to bike on a roadway, given its physical characteristics, volumes, and speed. So from there, we joined the data to a GIS shapefile and filtered the roadways for our desired study area. And so, as I mentioned previously, the desired study area is essentially on the right in color, and it is all of the state numbered and US numbered routes that are not interstates or toll roads specifically. From there, we segmented the corridors into sub-corridors. This was to not ultimately for how we're scoring the corridors, but in a planning sense for future efforts to be able to examine corridors for more problematic areas. And in general, they were divided up into 15 to 20 mile segments, and the segmentation is based on connections to other major transportation routes or traveling through large towns or other kind of recreational points of interest. And out of the 85 state numbered routes, we created 170 subcorridors, but again, we'll be scoring based on the 85 so that we're able to address all of the corridors in a reasonable time frame. So the Excel tool, this is a screenshot from it, but I'll be diving into it in a moment, is how we assign the scores and developed the weights and ultimately scored all the corridors and came up with the list at the end. But I'll just go briefly over the scoring attributes that we used. So we broke them into kind of 5 major categories, being system preservation, mobility, roadway attributes, safety, and socioeconomics. So out of the system preservation, the New Hampshire roadway tiers and average annual daily traffic make up the bulk of that score. You know, we use the New Hampshire roadway tiers because that's already a heavily vetted metric used by New Hampshire DOT for managing their roadway network. And the scoring based on that kind of allows us to consider how New Hampshire DOT currently operates and maintains and invests in their corridors. And similarly, AADT gives a metric on how much the road is used. And then moving on to mobility, the growth rate kind of shows us where traffic trends have gone over the past 10 years to score corridors that are becoming more heavily congested, while driveway permits allows us a proxy for future growth development that we don't otherwise have a readily available data set to account for. Similarly, and then bicycle level of traffic stress and desired bike facilities kind of account for the multimodal component of the mobility there. And I think the rest of them I've already discussed at some point here. So I'm going to move on to both the story map and the prioritization tool. So the story map is kind of a visual of the corridors done up. Oh, it's coming up on the other screen. Nope. Are you able to see, you guys able to see that, or is it still in the presentation?
It's still on the slide.
Oh, okay. Let me stop sharing and reshare there. So yes, the story map is a ArcGIS kind of summary of all of the different data components that went into the scoring. So we have the tier list map, the AADT maps, the AADT growth map, the physical roadway attributes, which are the number of lanes for each roadway, the bicycle level of traffic stress, access permits, safety heat map, the injury heat map, fatality heat map, and population density, population change, socioeconomic, non-English speaking, I should say, and the poverty rates, as well as foreign-born population. So this is an interactable map. We can certainly kind of go through this in more detail during if any Q&A comes up, but I will now transfer it over to the tool demonstration. So one sec, let me reshare my screen again. All right, can everybody see the Excel now?
Yes.
Yep.
So this is the tool that we're using to score everything. In general, you can select a corridor from the list of all the corridors, and it'll populate all the data points that I've spoke to, as well as show the segmentation data points. And it also describes all of the weighting factors and the categories for all of these, as well as how they're scored. And it allows anybody to play with the weighting factors. We've made adjustments through feedback already, but in future iterations or future conditions where different data points may want to be added or different weights given, it's easy to adjust them. And ultimately, the scoring gets ran for every corridor through this macro, and it generates the corridor summary that we can see here. And these are already sorted by highest scoring to lowest scoring right now. And we have a kind of a top 5 of New Hampshire 114, 28, US 3, NH10, and NH 101 are the kind of highest scoring corridors of this. And I know it just we promised that we didn't know that the 114 was one of the programmed corridors coming into this, but that ended up being the highest scoring one based on our metrics. But that's just a brief demonstration of the tool results and how it works. But I think from there, I will open it up to any questions.
Was being high good or bad?
Being high means it's a priority to have a corridor study done, right?
Correct.
And Route 114 in Bedford and Goffstown is the one project so far that is programmed in the corridor study program. So that's meshes well with their results, given that 114 rises to the top of their Excel model.
Andy, you want to stop sharing for a second?
Sure.
Bruce, I have a question. The score there, is that for the entire length of the corridor, or can it break it down into individual segments?
It is for the entire length in this one. We have developed a separate model that has the individual segments, which I think will be useful in the planning process and the initial kind of corridor study process to identify the more problematic areas within a corridor itself. The reason we didn't ultimately score based on every single segment was that it produced over 170 segments, and that would result in many years of corridor studies with which we want to address these in a more timely manner.
But we will be using those prioritized units to guide how we're going to scope actual studies going forward.
So, for example, when you look at 114, you'll look at sections that are, the highest priority there.
Yep, what I expect, and we haven't dived deep into this yet, but what I expect is that the current 10-year plan scope is likely to be expanded in order to address the corridor scope, if that makes sense. So right now you go from the 101-114 intersection to the Henry Bridge Road intersection in Goffstown, and I expect it will expand beyond that endpoint to cover more of the corridor. So I'd just like to talk about next steps real quick. We're still in the process of further refinement of the prioritization tool. The steering committee has already provided some feedback, and we are hosting this meeting and at least one other meeting, possibly more, with the RPCs in order to get questions and some feedback to further refine the tool. And then ultimately we intend to finalize the priority list of corridors and start the development of the scope of corridor study number 1, which, as we've highlighted, is expected to be the 114 Bedford Goffstown 41859. And then I will leave my contact information up there, but certainly I see that we have some questions. So Kristen, if you want to go first.
Hi, I was just wondering, did you use like the DOT safety data for accidents? I know in the past when we've tried to use it, it's been difficult to use with locatable versus non-locatable crashes and crashes showing up and where it doesn't meet the description if you like open up the GIS layers. So just wondering what the data was and how accurate you think it is.
Yeah, we received the point data for 2015 to 2019, and there was a change in how methodology happened in 2017. So it was actually kind of 2015 to halfway through 2017, and then half of 2017 through 19. You know, I think, I guess at the statewide level, it's a little difficult to investigate every point location. So we do kind of have to trust that there's at least the general trends of safety are located in proximity to their corridors. It's very possible that there could be questions about the specifics on any given crash, but yeah, we're kind of working with the statewide data set. It's tough to kind of scrutinize every single point crash.
Sure. The benefit to what we're doing here, though, is because we're not looking at specific locations yet. We're trusting that the location of a crash on a corridor is close enough.
Hey, could you check the chat box? There's a couple questions in there.
Yep. I was going to go through the hands raised first and then check in the chat box. So
Yeah,
I
no,
see.
the chat box is kind of unrelated. So if Lee Levine wants to go next.
Okay.
Or thank you. Yeah, since we're here at the MPO, I was wondering if the corridor study here is taking into consideration some of the resources that the MPO develops. For example, the CMP for prioritizing corridors for congestion. It seems like safety is a big focus here, but that was one question I had. The MPO's travel demand model, the long range plan, that sort of thing. So for the urbanized areas and the MPO areas where those resources exist, I'm just curious how some of those resources are maybe considered in this.
Yep, that's a great question, Lee. So for the prioritization efforts, not a function of what we're looking at. We're just trying to identify a prioritized list to go after corridor studies in a way that makes sense, that we're getting after those corridors that need the attention early on in the process. But as we develop individual corridor study scopes, I anticipate that we will have local or corridor specific steering committees that will include representation from the MPOs and RPCs when we get into the rural areas, and that when we are in those conversations, that all of that planning work is coming to bear on the conversation we're having as it relates to individual corridors. So not yet, but yes, going forward.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I think there's some state resources too. The TAMP was one example I thought of, strategic highway safety plan. There's a lot of other stuff out there that can be considered, I think, in the process of prioritizing corridors. Thank you.
And I see that I see that there's a request in the chat box for the ArcGIS link. None of the information that we're sharing yet is what we would call ready to be distributed publicly. We're still in the refinement process, so not yet, but when we get closer to finalizing this, yes. Other questions? Questions from in the room?
It's not, thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take the lack of questions as we did a good job being informative and not that everyone's now sleeping. It is pretty dense material that we're putting out there. We just try to get it out there, share the information, what we did, and then get right to questions. So if I lost anyone along the way and you have additional questions, my contact information is on the screen. Certainly the staff at Southern knows how to get a hold of me, and we're happy to engage further.
All right, well, thank you very much. Actually, it was very interesting. Next on the agenda is a freight truck parking inventory from David Tilton, Transportation Planner, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
Excuse me while I get to presentation.
Right, Dave, if you had that pulled up earlier,
Yeah, no, understandable.
computer.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
All right, can everyone see that?
Yep.
All right, hi, my name is David Tilton. I'm gonna be doing a brief introduction to a new project that we're gonna be undertaking at Southern New Hampshire. It's a truck parking inventory for the region. This presentation is designed to give the TAC members an overview of the project and to give some background information on commercial truck parking data at a state and national level. Truck parking shortages are a national safety concern. When truck parking is not available, then truck drivers will look to other unauthorized, unsecure, unsafe locations to park their vehicles, and that can create a safety hazard. So we have Section 1401 of the MAP 21 Act, also known as Jason's Law, directs USDOT to conduct a survey and a comparative assessment to evaluate each state's capability to provide adequate parking and rest facilities for commercial motor vehicles. It's also to assess the volume of commercial motor vehicle traffic in each state and develop a system of metrics to measure that commercial parking facilities in each state. The first survey was conducted in 2014 and published in 2015. With an updated survey in 2019 that was published in 2020, sorry. The Jason's Law is named after Jason Rivenberg, who you'll see up in the top right-hand corner. He was a interstate commercial truck driver who was murdered in his cab while sleeping in March of 2009 in South Carolina. He had a destination at a warehouse to make a delivery. He was a couple hours early for that delivery. And he progressed, he went to a abandoned gas station that was known in the interstate trucking community to be a safe location to wait for this warehouse to open. While he was sleeping, he was murdered and robbed of $7. His wife, Hope Rivenberg, has been an advocate for safe, secure, authorized truck parking facilities in spaces and has helped enact federal legislation. So here we have a map showing truck parking facilities from the 2019 update to the Jason's Law survey. There's approximately 313,000 truck parking spaces nationally in 2019. 40,000 of those spaces are located at public rest areas, with 273,000 truck park spaces at private truck stops. This shows the gap between the public and the private sectors in providing truck stops. In 2014 and 2019, there was a 6% increase in truck parking spaces at public rest areas and 11% increase in truck parking spaces at privately owned truck stops. The demand is vastly outpacing the construction of new truck parking spaces. Here we have a map, chart that shows state by state the number of located truck parking spaces that was in 2014 and located in 2019 update. As we see, New Hampshire has a very minimal increase in truck parking spaces at that time, but we are not alone in that. As we go across the chart looking, the number of states that have either stayed the same or have lost truck parking spaces greatly outpaces the number of states that have added to their inventory. This is a worrisome trend that is looking to continue as demand for interstate trucking ramps up. And here I broke out the New England states away from the national database so we can see how New Hampshire ranks with its neighbors. As we can see, the state of Connecticut leads the pack in almost every single metric. It has 1,536 total spaces. New Hampshire ranks fourth in that metric, just barely beating out Vermont in 2019. When we look at the number of publicly owned truck spaces at our rest areas and things of that nature, we drop down to fifth. So what type of factors generate truck parking demand? Fatigue. Truck drivers operate large machineries, but they're not machines themselves. They get tired, they get sick. Even after 10 hours of rest that they're mandated, they may wake up and continue driving and not feel up to the task. If they pull into a rest area or a privately owned truck stop and those truck spaces are all filled and they're not against their mandated hours of service, they may decide to push on to find another truck rest area or truck stop, and fatigue results in 50,000 injured, 795 people killed nationally in 2017 due to fatigue-related accidents. Now that number takes into account all of the motoring public, not just the commercial, but it does show how fatigue seriously impacts driving ability. There's also staging, as we pointed out with Jason's Law. Warehouses, logistics centers, deliveries at plants, they usually allow for a delivery window. Truck drivers will want to be early rather than late for that delivery window. So that facilitates them parking off-site close to wherever they're bringing their wares to be close by to the delivery window. Next, we have federally mandated breaks. The federal hours of service regulations mandate that 10 hours of rest follow 14 hours on duty. This is tracked using electronic logging devices that are tied to the vehicle, and they're not fabricated or fooled as easily as paper logs were back in the past. So the penalties are strict if a driver goes over their 14 hours on duty, and during that 10 hours, the truck needs to remain motionless. So a truck driver that is coming against that ceiling will find, if they can't find adequate authorized truck parking spaces, they will go to any spot that they can fit their truck for that 10 hours of rest. And the other part is emergencies, things that cannot be planned for. A truck driver may plan out a very concise, precise route that will allow them to get their delivery destinations and to their rest areas on time. But a road closure due to weather or crashes could derail that route and push them off route into an area that they're either not familiar with or that does not have any adequate truck parking facilities. So when a truck driver cannot find an authorized, safe, secure place to put their vehicle, they will go to unauthorized truck parking locations. So they do not come into violation of their federal hours of service. Jason's Law, the survey in 2019 for the respondents, 98% of the drivers who responded to that reported that they've had problems finding parking spaces at authorized locations. When that happens, they will turn to unauthorized locations, as we see here: highway shoulders, freeway exit and entrance ramps, retail parking lots, and abandoned businesses. This creates a safety hazard for the drivers and for the public. And here we have some of the consequences that can result from unauthorized truck parking. These are just a couple of news headlines that I pulled up real quick. The inability to find parking can lead to fatigued drivers, which could lead to an accident. Drivers that park in unsecured, unlit, unauthorized areas are more often to be the victims of crime, as we saw with Jason Rivenberg. Motorists, as we see in the top left, will sometimes not expect a large tractor trailer to be on a freeway off-ramp, and crashes can occur. And then less severe, but still very important, congestion on local roadways around distribution centers. As we said, if they have a delivery window that they have to meet, they're going to want to be there earlier rather than later. That will facilitate them finding a place to park near the destination so they can meet that window. And then truck drivers to run their utilities inside their cab, AC, refrigerator, heat. If they do not have a facility that they can plug into, then they will idle their vehicle. This increases air pollution from the trucks idling. This is a map of the region, and it shows some of the preliminary locations that we've looked at so far. The green locations are publicly owned. This is your two rest areas on Hooksett on 93, and the red dots are privately owned. Now, I should point out that not all of these are full truck stops that you would see in the Midwest or out west that have all the amenities that a truck driver would need. Many of these are just gas stations that provide high-speed diesel fuel and have a couple of locations for truck parking around the side or the back. In fact, the truck stop in Candia, for what we know so far, is the only location in our region that provides the amenities that a truck driver would need on a long haul. This includes showers and a store that caters to goods for long haul truck drivers. This was used, these locations were found out by just using the internet and Google Maps. So our goals and next steps. Our goal is to create a comprehensive truck park inventory for our region. This is an introductory thing, so these next steps are a little bit fluid, but what we're looking for is to create almost a regional Jason's Law survey and analysis. So right now we are researching and analyzing best practices from national studies and reports. We're collecting whatever easily found out data that we can have through the internet. This is where we can need help from our local communities to help us locate any truck parking locations that are utilized, either authorized or unauthorized in their communities that we may not be aware of. In the next upcoming weeks and months, we're going to create a list of stakeholders that will include industry and community contacts. And through this contact, we're looking to develop surveys that we can specialize to the community stakeholders and the industry stakeholders. The data that we will get from those surveys and from our own site visits, we're going to come up with a conditions analysis and finalize the inventory. Here is a slide showing some of the resources that we're looking at to help us guide us through this process. As you can see, it's a mixture of studies and reports and best practices from the national level to the state level and even some regional. So this is my contact information if anybody would like to contact me about any questions or anything that may come up after the presentation or after the meeting. And I will open up the floor to any questions or comments that anyone may have.
A couple items in the chat room.
All right.
You can hit stop share.
Okay,
The red button.
Any other questions? Any questions?
So at the moment, you're just looking for straight inventory, not looking for where can we put inventory.
Yeah, so hopefully this will be an offshoot of something. Right now, we're looking to see what we have. Once we determine what we have and we have a comprehensive inventory, then we can discuss about how we can use that data to try to locate rest area or parking lot deserts, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, everybody.
Next item, Week Without Driving Challenge by Tammy Zamoyski, Regional Planner, Southern Hampshire Planning Commission.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm video now.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to give you an overview of the Week Without Driving Challenge. So this challenge is different than Bike to Work Week and the Commute Smart Challenge and the other events that celebrate active transportation. In 2021, the Disability Mobility Initiative launched the Week Without Driving to challenge our leaders and decision makers to better understand the barriers that non-drivers experience in accessing their communities. 31 out of every 100 residents in the United States lack a driver's license. Mobility in the US is centered around being able to drive, so this means that people who cannot drive are likely to face exclusion from work, social activities, education, and community inclusion. So as members of the TAC, as transportation planners and engineers, I think it'll be really valuable for all of us to take the Week Without Driving challenge. So this is your formal invitation to join. The rules are really simple. Participants can get around however they want, but they cannot drive themselves. This applies to all activities. You can ask someone else to drive you or pay for rides, but you need to note how much this costs you, both financially or in favors. Throughout the week, I'll be sending emails to all of the participants, and I will challenge you to think about what anticipated challenges you may have encountered so far, come up with any pleasant surprises that you may have discovered, and then you can also share your stories using the hashtag Week Without Driving on social media. So I'll be collecting everybody's stories throughout the state of New Hampshire, and my goal is to put together a graphic like this and then share this with all of the other participants in the state so you can all see what everybody's experience has been. And this is an example from the Washington State Challenge last year. At the end of the challenge, I'll be meeting with the New Hampshire Challenge organizing team, and we'll be sharing all of our lessons learned and some of the stories that we've collected. And then in November, we'll take all of those stories and we'll share them with the National Organizing Coalition, which includes America Walks and a few other organizations. I recognize that for a lot of people, it's impossible to give up your car for a week. So I want everybody to be able to participate in this challenge. I think it'll be really beneficial. So I came up with a few alternative exercises that you might commit to doing one or two of these throughout the week. So the first one is walk, bike, or scoot to the nearest school to see how students might get there independently. And luckily for us, Walk and Roll to School Day is actually taking place right in the middle of the challenge on October 4th. So I think that this would be a great opportunity to find a walking train or a bike school bus, and you can join and see what the experience of these students is. The second option I want to present is take public transit or ride sharing like Uber or a taxi to a grocery store. And if you didn't know, MTA and CART serves half of our SNHPC towns. So if you want to find public transit, you can talk to Ben, who's not in the room. He can help you find a ride in your community. You can also walk or bike around your neighborhood or your office to get some exercise and just see what you notice. This picture in the bottom I actually took on my bike ride home the other day. It's a sign designating this as an area where a blind person lives. And somebody put all of their trash receptacles right underneath the sign. I don't think that this was, malicious or anything like that, but if you only go from your driveway to your front door, you might not realize how difficult and dangerous this might be for someone with a disability or even someone who's just pushing a stroller. And the last one is more of a reflection. Just think about how we as planners, engineers, town staff, community leaders can level the playing field for non-drivers. So here's a QR code. If anybody wants to sign up right now, you can scan this with your cell phone. There's also a link to sign up on our homepage under news and notices. As of this morning, I have 1 select board member, 6 planning professionals, and 1 member of the general public signed up for the challenge. And we have 2 local nonprofits and 1 statewide organization that have offered to help with outreach. If there are any questions or ideas on how we can reach our leaders, here's my contact information.
Actually, I have a question. How have you put out the notice for this to folks?
So I actually haven't started that yet. I've been doing individual outreach to a lot of our colleagues at other planning commissions to see what their ideas are. We're still about 2 months out from the challenge, so I've been meeting with the National Coalition. We actually just had a meeting yesterday, and that's where we've been talking about some of our challenges so far. Like I had a colleague yesterday tell me I work in Nashua and I live in Boston. I could never give up my car for a week, so
Excuses.
that was one of the reasons why we came up with some of the alternative activities. So we will be doing press releases, we'll be putting this out on social media. But I'm really actually kind of just relying on nonprofit organizations to do a lot of the outreach. So we're helping to organize this, but it's really up to the community to ask their leaders to participate.
So I was gonna bring these home and tape them on my door, you know, the selectman's door, but I'll wait till you were ready.
Oh, no, we're ready. I haven't done any outreach to the general public yet. It's mostly been internal.
I'll just make another comment. I think the dates of October 2nd through the 8th is actually pretty good. I think the bicycle one, there's the similar program for bicycle use that's kind of more in the winter, which isn't really, well, I don't know if that's.
Not
the best
very
choice
attractive.
time frame for that one, but
Yes, there's typically a bike to work week in May and then a winter bike to work week in February.
and then obviously referring to, but
Right.
anyway.
Much nicer to bike in a cool, autumn morning with foliage around. Pretty attractive week to do that, I think.
Yeah.
Approaching peak foliage. Maybe a few days before.
Any questions?
Mike Whitten has his hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to say if anybody wants to participate during that week, just let me know and I'll get you a free weekly pass for MTA. So you can access everything from Concord to Nashua and in between at no cost.
Thanks, Mike.
You add that to your notifications, obviously.
Yes, I will.
All right.
We
Anything
also
else?
just comment in the chat.
All set? All right, thank you. Anybody have any other business? If not, could I have a consensus to adjourn? Everyone say aye. Thank you. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Anyone opposed can stick around.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Great, I'm seeing it.
Bye, thank you.